Katie Virtue, a consultant with FESTIVE Road, the consultancy on a mission to create better travel and meetings management. Today, I'm in conversation with Steve Banks from Agiito. Welcome, Steve.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, nice to see you. And how's the show going?
It's going very well. Really good new couple of days in a new venue. Great to catch up with people, new and old.
Great. So today we're talking about 2022 and beyond, and different aspects that those who manage travel or travel buyers should consider. So which aspect of travel management do you think is important for travel buyers?
Well, we're very much a lot of concentration on risk. So I think during the pandemic, there were differing attitudes towards risk. And I think now, post-pandemic or living as an endemic, we're now seeing a more comprehensive view to risk, both at individual level and corporate level.
Yeah, and I imagine there are more travel managers working with their risk departments, as duty of care has certainly ratcheted up on the priority list.
Yes, it certainly has. I think there was a preconception previously that risk happened on trip. Now people recognise that risk now occurs pre-trip. So previously there may have been underlying health conditions that weren't relevant, maybe somebody having severe asthma. That is now quite a contributing factor. I think also from a risk perspective, people want to look at sustainability options as well. So you've got a corporate perspective and you've got a traveller perspective. And I think then as the booker and as an intermediary, you've then got us and the bookers then trying to get the best fit for the corporate and for the traveller.
Yeah, I love that viewpoint of having that balance, because traveler experience, employee experience has seemed to become more of a priority for organizations. So can you tell us a little bit more about why you're talking about risk and your view of it?
Yeah, I think for the very nature of the last 18 months has focused the mind on the different risks that apply in different environments and different factors that then contribute to risk. So I touched on health and underlying health conditions. I'd say appetite for risk is really important. And I mean that at both corporate level and the individual level. So corporate, brand reputation, brand integrity is always really critical. Duty of care is also very critical. So from that risk element, we've always worked very closely with organisations to understand their appetite for risk and to mitigate their risk when people are travelling.
Right.
And historically, to mitigate the risk, it was about travelling to various countries of the world, arriving late at night, people travelling on their own, did they have suitable adequate funds, etc. But I think the complexity of the pandemic has really, the appetite for risk is all around us. We read it in the news, we hear it on social media. We've got families and friends also being impacted. People have been shielding, elderly parents, etc. So risk became a very personal choice as well. And as a consequence, you're trying to marry up a corporate risk policy with a personal risk in their attitude to risk as well. And for us, that's really where it's been both challenging but fascinating, having those conversations with the corporate, bringing risk in, bringing HR in, the policy holders, and then determining, well, so what does good look like? And then working across the different stakeholders, the demographics of the travelling, the sector they're in, whether they need to travel, purposeful travel over recent months, and then really working with the organisation to ensure they've got a very tailored but suitable and relevant process for them and their travellers.
Yeah, and it's interesting you mentioned some of the previous risks to consider. I know there's been discussion lately as more travel has returned to say, well, we still have the pandemic risk and all these new health risks, but we can't forget about that other piece when you're traveling and just let that fall to the wayside. So, as you said, a lot more complex now.
Absolutely.
Are you focused on specific, you talked about, the conversations and tools that you offer to organizations, or do you see them asking for tools to help manage risk?
Yeah, we've got a number of tools we use. Historically, the types of tools we were using were, could we identify the people at risk, the people that were on the red eye, the people that were perhaps suffering from travel burnout, from travellers. We all recognise travel is no fun when you're doing it a lot all the time, and it's very unhealthy hours. I mean, it leads to unhealthy diet, lack of exercise, and obviously mental well-being as well. So historically, we worked with organisations, and one of the most powerful things we have is data. So we're working with the data to say, these are the collection of people we think could be at risk because of the type of travel they do or the volume of travel they do. Can we work with you to identify more about the demographic of their road profile and what they do? So that was probably the risk mitigation tools we were using previously. I think then during the pandemic, it was then allowing or empowering a booker to make an informed choice on the right solution for them when it comes to risk. So it was things like we had a COVID Shield tool on our online booking tool that says this hotel has been pre-vetted to be COVID secure to send your people to. These are the protocols that were in place. And trying to allow people to make the best empowered choice for them based on the corporate policy, their individual preference, and also giving them that reassurance as well. So again, historically you always had, things like 24-hour support, traveller tracking, data handoff to intermediaries. Now it was being able to almost have that central repository of information for people to be able to plan their travel as effectively as possible, and as I said, to mitigate the risk.
Right. And then based on all of these conversations you're having and so much insight you've shared already, what advice would you give to someone who is now working on their return to travel plans? They have people starting to get out there, and what do they have to consider from a risk standpoint?
Know your people. So I think it's really important to know your people. A lot of organizations, they know what they spend and where they spend it, but they don't know how and why. So I think it's really important to be able to understand when people are traveling, for what reason, everybody talks about the ROI, and it's really hard to measure the ROI on travel. So from a risk perspective, understand the demographics of the people. Are they having to travel? Then work with the stakeholders in the business. Is the travel policy fit for purpose? From a HR perspective, is there an actual duty of care? Making sure it's not a tick box exercise. Working with perhaps the CFO or cost center managers and procurement to also say, well, actually, cost is important, but it might not be the primary factor here. And then actually working with the bookers and the travelers to say, so what's important to you? What is your attitude to travel? What is your attitude to risk? We then, as an intermediary, we find that then working across those pan roles within an organization, often we're bringing it together because in a number of organizations, certainly that we have, procurement manage the contract, but they don't always bring the different stakeholders together. So we see really us as the intermediary of bringing those stakeholders together and actually using our experience and our knowledge and what's happening in their peers to be able to inform them on that policy. So create the policy, communicate the policy, make people feel supported, and when things do go wrong or people have a question, make sure you've got a very clear, concise way of being able to communicate and get those answers. Yeah, great summary, and especially on a topic that I know people are very interested to hear right now how to handle it. So thank you, Steve, for your insights today. Thank you much.